In September of the year 1900, a popular British magazine named Pearson's published two photographs of icebergs in the St. John's Harbour. The one on the left was by a professional photographer named S.H. Parsons. The one on the right had been taken by a school student named Elsie Holloway. Pearson's incorrectly credited the photo to a Scottish photographer named Valentine, but when the mistake was uncovered, the magazine sent a check to Elsie Holloway. It was her first step into the world of professional photography, and it was a field she would come to master. Elizabeth Mary Holloway was born in St. John's on May 21, 1882. She was the second of 4 children, but when she was just 6 years old, her brother William and her younger sister Katie died in a diphtheria epidemic in St. John's. This left just Elsie and her younger brother, Bert. Despite this early tragedy, the two grew up in a vibrant and open-minded household that embraced creativity and curiosity. Parents Henrietta and Robert Holloway encouraged their children's hobbies and nurtured their natural talents. But more than anyone, it was Elsie's father who fostered her interest in photography. Robert Edwards Holloway was a dynamic man with wide-ranging interests. He was a scientist, a naturalist, a teacher, and a skilled amateur photographer. In 1874, a then 24-year-old Robert left his home in Britain to become the principal of the Wesleyan Academy in St. John's. What began as a 4-year contract became a 30-year vocation. Under Holloway's care, the Wesleyan Academy developed into a respected center of learning that was later known as the Methodist College. He equipped the school with state-of-the-art science laboratories, he expanded instruction in physics and chemistry, and he added new courses in astronomy and geology. He also took an active interest in his students, and he infected them with his love of science. Work was not confined to the schoolroom or to school hours. Nights could find Holloway stargazing with his pupils, and days could find them collecting leaves, lichens, and other specimens along the city's hiking trails. Robert Holloway was also ahead of his time in the way he encouraged the girls in his class. As far as he was concerned, science and math were just as much for them as they were for the boys. In the school's magazine, called the Collegian, Holloway heaped equal praise on the boys and the girls who achieved academic excellence. It was in this environment of open-mindedness and love of learning that Elsie Holloway grew up. When she was old enough, she too attended the Methodist College, and her name also appeared among those who scored well in math and science. By the 1890s, Elsie's father had adopted a new passion: photography. Part science, part art, it appealed to Robert's sharp mind and his creativity. Landscapes became his specialty. His work gained in recognition, and his photos were published in local magazines like the Newfoundland Quarterly and in international ones like the London Illustrated News. 2 of his images even appeared on Newfoundland stamps. True to form, Holloway shared his interest in photography with his children and with his pupils. He offered extracurricular courses in developing and printing, and he took students on outings with the camera. On one fine May day in 1899, Holloway and a group of schoolgirls went to the Outer Battery to take photos. It was there that Elsie took her iceberg photo. From beneath the camera's black cape, she composed her shot, consulted with her father on lighting, and finally took the photo that would be published in Pearson's magazine 1 year later. In 1901, Elsie traveled to England to take courses in photography, but she would always say that her greatest teacher was her father. The two went on many excursions with their camera. The most elaborate came in the summertime, when the Holloways set out on their many tours across Newfoundland and Labrador. The camera and tripod were the family's constant traveling companions. During these trips, Robert Holloway took countless photographs of the Dominion's communities and its wild spaces. Today, these images provide an important window into a Newfoundland and Labrador that existed more than a century ago. Most are landscapes. A small number show the everyday activities of Outport residents, and a few capture the Holloway family. Here are Elsie and Henrietta fishing on the Humber River. For the Holloways, these trips were filled with adventure and a love of the natural world. But they also served another purpose. Robert was a longtime sufferer of tuberculosis. The school year took a serious toll on his health, and he needed the summers to recover. He did that by escaping to rural areas. It was an environment he believed was healthier than St. John's. On September 14, 1904, Robert Holloway finally succumbed to the disease that had afflicted him for decades. In 1929, the Methodist College was renamed Holloway School in his honor. Elsie mourned the loss of her father, but she kept alive his love for photography. 1 year after Robert died, Elsie, Bert, and Henrietta moved into a new house on Gower Street. Elsie and Bert built a darkroom in the attic. They honed their skills, and they dreamed of opening their own studio. The family also published a book of photographs that Robert Holloway had been working on before he died. Through Newfoundland with the Camera was his love letter to the Dominion. The book was so popular that a second edition came out. Proceeds helped Elsie and Bert to start their own photography business. In 1908, they opened Holloway Studio on the corner of Bates Hill and Henry Street in downtown St. John's. The building was cutting edge for its time. Built to the Holloway specifications, it was equipped with a state-of-the-art darkroom and large portrait studios that let in ample natural light. The studio sold prints made from the thousands of glass plate negatives that Robert Holloway had left to his children. Elsie and Bert also sold their own services as photographers. Elsie specialized in portrait and group photography, while Bert focused on landscapes. But they both had a taste for combining their work with adventure travel. Bert journeyed to the North Atlantic ice floes, where he produced some of the earliest and best photos we have of the turn-of-the-century seal hunt. In 1914, Elsie voyaged up and down the Labrador coast with her camera. Many of her photos from this trip have still survived. That same year, the First World War broke out. Elsie and Bert found steady work photographing hundreds of departing soldiers. The only signature that appears on these photographs is the surname Holloway, so it is impossible to know whether the brother or the sister was the photographer. This changed after 1915 when Bert enlisted in the Newfoundland Regiment. Before he went overseas, Elsie took his portrait. Bert worked as a sniper and an intelligence officer. In 1917, he was mentioned in dispatches for capturing enemy positions and for bringing back important information. That same year, officials with the Newfoundland Regiment had decided to put Bert's talents to a new use as a war photographer. Most other countries had a war artist, and Bert seemed like an ideal choice to fill this role for Newfoundland. Unfortunately, before these orders were released, Bert was reported missing in action after a battle at Monchy-le-Preux on April 14, 1917. The family spent a few tortured months wondering if he was alive or dead. In September, a letter reached Elsie.
Dear Miss Holloway, Mr. Bennet sent a telegram to London asking for further particulars of your brother, which might be obtained from men who are now prisoners in Germany. In the meantime, I have received the following message from the Record Office. Number 122 Curran states that he saw Lieutenant Holloway hit April 14th, and in an attempt to crawl in, machine gun was turned on him. Curran thinks Holloway was killed. I very much regret that better news does not seem to be forthcoming.
Fears were eventually confirmed when Bert was listed as killed in action. Alongside his mother and sister, Bert also left behind a wife and 2 children, a 5-year-old son and a 2-year-old daughter. Elsie was left alone to run Holloway's studio. Managing a business was an unusual role for a woman in early 20th century Newfoundland, but Elsie Holloway was more than equal to the task. She soon became one of the most sought-after photographers in the Dominion and eventually had 12 people on her payroll. During the war, Elsie produced hundreds of soldier portraits. She also documented life in wartime St. John's. That is likely her, standing on a rooftop with her camera, trying to get that perfect shot. The photos she took during this period are among the most important images of Newfoundland and Labrador history. They tell a story that is not always present in other media produced in that period. At a time when newspapers tended to glorify the war and to use language that was brimming with bravado and optimism, the Holloway photos were all too human. The men staring back are young and vulnerable. Some of these soldiers never came home. For their families, these images would become a treasured memory of the loved one they lost overseas. A century later, these same images have earned an important place in museums and galleries. They are also reproduced in books and documentaries. After the war, Elsie continued to specialize in portrait photography. She was an innovator in the field. In a time when posed photographs were formal, Elsie's were warm, natural, and filled with personality. Her sense of playfulness is particularly evident in her photographs of children, and her talent for portraits even extended to Newfoundland dogs. The animals were every bit as well posed as her human subjects. Elsie also excelled outside of the studio. In 1919, she photographed the British aviators John Alcock and Arthur Whitten Brown as they prepared to make the world's first non-stop transatlantic flight from Newfoundland to Ireland. She was also at Harbour Grace in 1932 to document Amelia Earhart making her historic flight across the Atlantic Ocean. Elsie continued to work until she was 65. In 1946, she sold Holloway Studio and retired. The new owner was another well-known photographer named C.F. Marshall, but he wisely decided to keep the Holloway name on the studio because of the goodwill associated with the business. Elsie spent many of her later years driving around the island, revisiting the places she had traveled to with her father on their summer excursions with the camera. Elsie Holloway died on October 12, 1971. She was 89 years old.